Let the record reflect that this audio-video conference meeting of the Facilities and Safety Committee meeting was properly noticed as required by state law, the Open Meetings Act, and the special provisions that we are operating under during these circumstances. The first item of business is an update report on the Vernon Middle School choir and the band hall building damaged by fire and the pending reconstruction and restoration work. Mr. Tapia, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Powers, members of the committee, Dr. Nirella, colleagues. The first, can you hear me? Can you hear me pretty good?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay. The first project I want to talk about is the Vernon Band Hall Choir building. Last time we met, we talked about we had a fire, and then we were going to put a plan together and let you know how we were going to deal with this. So we've met with the insurance adjusters out at the site. They sent somebody to do an inventory of everything that was in the building, in every single room. It was an exhaustive chore, but she was able to get through everything, working with our maintenance staff, the school custodians, school administrator. And then they also had to jot down the things that were burnt and thrown away when maintenance went and cleaned up. So they have a very detailed list. The contractor was also there working with us because the contractor is going to be responsible for cleaning and disinfecting anything that's salvageable as part of their bid that the purchase order we issued to them. And they've already applied for a building permit. They should get it here by the end of the week. So the next step now is for the insurance. There's another insurance guy coming to review all the materials that are in the report on site to see now what is left and saved, what of that can be clean and disinfected and still in very good shape, and what is damaged and needs to be thrown away, and that'll be put in the report to see if we can get it replaced through the insurance, get a reimbursement on that. So that's what we're working on now. They should get that process going on later this week. The building permit will probably be issued by this Friday. So we're anticipating within 10 days to start the demolition work, which includes the asbestos abatement when they tear out the floor tile, because it's got asbestos underneath. So all that is in the works, and we should, within 7 to 10 days, we got to start the actual construction project. Right now, we're still dealing with all the insurance things. And this is a drawing of the area that was burnt and damaged. Either the choir hall is the one that got most of the fire. The rest of it is all smoke damage and water damage. So that's where we are on that project. Just some of the pictures that we took after the fire happened. It was pretty charred and smell everywhere. And we think the fire started in the electrical closet with a short, and the heat got so intense that it unsoldered one of the old pipes, because the lead where the solder was just popped out. It didn't break, it just slipped out from the old solder weld. So then that in turn, the fire, the water started spraying and acted like a sprinkler system and actually turned off the main electrical, the fire, and shorted out the panels, so it tripped the breaker, and that saved the entire building from being burned down. So any questions on the Vernon Band Hall?
Okay, if there's, anybody have any questions? All right, let's move on into item number 3, the update of the TRE funded projects. Oscar?
Yes, Mr. Powers. Treasure Hills Phase 2 is on, it's still on target. It's got 60% complete, and I'll go straight to the pictures to show you where we are here. If you follow my cursor, this is the new parking lot that has been paved already. And what's pending is the big parent drop-off. That's a caliche right now. That's going to be the big parent drop-off that connects over from the Treasure Hills neighborhood onto that long drive that we did behind the new wing. And then, of course, we have Haynes Street, which the city's been repairing all the underground water and sewer lines and repaving the street. So we're going to have a brand new Haynes Street in front of our new school. And if you really look at this site here, the only thing that's remaining is the kitchen dining hall and part of that 4th, 5th grade wing. Everything else is a new campus with the addition to the library and some extra classrooms. new administration, and the new two-story wing, and even the mini gym's getting a little addition to the back as well. So it's, I would say 2/3 of it is new construction.
Looks great.
A close-up of the office area, the main entry centered. You have the new wing on the left and the new construction on the right. So you'll have a canopy connecting from left to right or right to left, right in front of that new administration building. And so you'll have the parent drop off with some special parking spaces as well. So it's starting to the getting out of the ground was the hard part because there was so many utilities and unknown things underground. A lot of conflicts with the storm sewer lines, sprinkler lines, water lines, gas lines. The piers where they're going, we're hitting things. So it took a lot of time, but we're finally out of the ground. And once you see the walls and the steel beams and the roof going up, that's when we'll really start making some progress. And the good thing is that even if it rains, we have permeable surfaces where the equipment can still keep working without sinking, and so it shouldn't cause too many delays other than the actual rain days.
Oscar, let me ask you a question. On those unknown items that you talked about, the gas lines and the piers and so forth, one, has that prolonged our completion date? And two, what about the cost? Those are unknown costs that we're going to have to absorb, or are they part of the contract price?
We are behind 3 to 4 weeks on Treasure Hills Phase 2 because of some of those delays and some weather delays. And at the end of the presentation, I have change orders, and I'm going to present three architectural directives, which are also they're basically change orders, which is going to outline specific costs associated with all those underground things and conflicts and redesigns that we've had to do. So there is some cost associated, but I'll present that at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this item?
Here's the new wing addition to the library. The opening here is a courtyard, and there's the library. We're actually going to enclose that and expand it out. And then these are the classrooms, GT classrooms and a special life skills unit that we have here as well. And that's just from ground level and elevation of the building with the library and the classroom addition. You can see the office there in the middle. Some of the steel work attaching to the concrete mason unit wall. The entry canopy with the walls here this is the office main entrance. And this is a little addition behind the gym. It's going to be storage in the coach's office. And that's the back wall we're going to be adding to. And we've already poured the slab and the wall starting to go up.
Hey, Oscar, one other question on materials. Are most of our materials already bought? Because I know like the price of steel has shot through the roof in the last 60 days. Are we all covered on that, or is that something else that may be increasing?
No, we're covered. When we sign a contract and we issue a PO, the prices are pretty much fixed. Unless there's something that causes a real problem with the contractor, with the subs. There is a section in the contract that at no fault of the contractor, we can make concessions on justifying additional costs, but we're not there yet, and the contractor hasn't asked for that. But lumber and steel have gone up in cost nationwide. Because not only do we have hurricanes in the summer, we also have all the wildfires in California, and now with the COVID affecting shipping and manufacture of raw products. So all those three things have contributed to higher materials costs and delays in delivery as well. So it's been a very unique year.
Thank you.
School entry vestibules, I presented this last time that we're all set. We already had the pre-construction meeting at the 3 schools. We set up with the principal, worked out where we're going to have the staging area for the workers to park, the materials, their temporary porta can, all that's ready. We're just waiting for spring break in a couple of weeks, and we'll start demolition at all those 3 sites at Fishman, Rodriguez, and Wilson. And they're small projects. They already ordered materials, so it should go pretty quick once we get started. The early college building is also moving along very well now that we're also up out of the ground. We're about 60% complete. And This was the first week of March here, and we have since started brickwork on the student entry side where the student parking lot is. You can see the bricks already going up. This is the first wall going up, and then they're starting to turn the corner in the back. So it's looking really nice. At the next meeting, I'll have some more detailed pictures of how the brick looks once they get some of the scaffolding out of the way, but it's looking really good.
Really nice.
And again, scaffolding, there's already brick on this section going up to past 2/3 of the way up. And this is the back side of the Kate building. At the wall I showed you earlier turns, and they're continuing around this corner. Over to the back to the left is the dining hall. This is the interior commons area with the learning stair and the big LGI room up on top. They've already started with the stairs on that big space. The corridors, they got stud walls. They're doing everything that goes above the drop ceiling, which is the mechanical systems, ductwork, sprinkler systems, lighting, PA systems, wiring, all kinds of things that have to be put in there before they start with ceiling grid. The roofing has been flashed in several of the areas, as you can see from the pictures. Where you hit the parapet wall, it turns up, and they flash that in. And you do have a little roof hatch here in this section. On the interior, they're starting to sheetrock some of the walls, and that tells me that they've also gotten approval from the city inspections, because you can't sheetrock without getting everything approved that's in the walls. And this is the area over the administration area it still hasn't been poured for the roof decking. So this is the last section they need to pour with, I'm sorry, they don't pour, they're putting rigid board insulation and then get the roofing system on this section, and that'll be the last one that is called. Once it's dried in, then it's weatherproof. So that's where we are on the early college UTRGV. We've also had a meeting yesterday with a team that's coordinating order of furniture, technology equipment, the Kate shop equipment, all the electronics pieces and AV projectors and screens and all those things that's part of the technology of the school. We'll also have a list of custodial equipment that's going to be needed and all the equipment and resources. So there's a big team having to do a lot of other things outside of the construction contract to get this school ready for opening for next fall. Any questions on early college?
I have one question, please. Mr. Chair, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Oscar, my question, which you've certainly heard before, but since this is a new building, and I'm wondering if you could talk for a moment about ventilation and what precautions are being made, and if not, anything we would need to do to make this up to date in terms of the COVID situation and ventilation.
The ventilation, what the engineers do in today's modern projects, they introduce fresh air units, which mixes outside air with air that's already inside the building. So it's always mixing and refreshing the air, and it's got filtration systems. Unlike the old designs where it just refiltered the air inside the building, and CO2 levels was a big problem there with carbon monoxide building up in the building. So that's why now we have fresh air. We are waiting for word on the CARES Act through the federal funding passed to the state to see. There's some districts waiting to see how much money is going to be there to introduce some other ionization equipment that you can put over the air conditioning coils as the air comes out. It's an additional filtration system that kills through UV and some ionization in the air, kills additional germs and diseases that are airborne. So we're waiting to see if we get some money on that, where we can do some more of our district-wide, start installing some of those units.
I really want to thank you for that, Oscar. I think we've some of us been talking about the fact that we're going to have to become much more proactive in protecting our people, and I think that ventilation is going to be something that that we're going to have to look at very seriously as educators across the country. And what a good position we're in HCISD, that we're thinking ahead in terms of using some of the CARES Act money. Cannot think of a better use for it. So thank you. And please, I would like to request that you keep us updated on that, because I am it's one of my highest interests in terms of building and old and new.
Sure,
Thank
Ms.
you. I'm really proud of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next project is the Transition Academy. This project is over 75% complete. It's 87% complete. And again, I'll go straight to the pictures. They speak 1,000 words. These are the elevations from the outside. They've already started filling it with the exterior brick, the laminate veneer on the wood panels. There you have an angle view, and then here you have the front entry with a sidewalk. The site is ready to accept landscaping. We've already issued a purchase order. We had a pre-construction this morning with Green Thumb landscapers. So there'll be some landscape beds there in the front of the building. There'll be some trees, sprinkler system, and they're going to start that here in a couple of days. The interior's already got laminate flooring. It's got the countertops, some cabinet work, all the sheetrock and finish work, some of the light fixtures. So it's really starting to look like a house in there.
That looks nice.
And exterior close-up details, the air conditioning unit for the shop in the back. And in the entry, there's a terrazzo sign. It's a logo for special children that was donated by one of our local vendors, me on terrazzo floor, and they installed it in there, so it's a very, very nice feature for the building in the entry lobby. And the restrooms are getting all the finish work with the tile and accessories and fixtures and things like that. So we're very close to, probably by the end of the month,
Very nice.
we'll be ready for the building, and we're just working on the landscaping, and then we're also working on a fencing bid to go get 3 quotes, and that'll be the last thing we install is the fencing to secure the perimeter.
Looks lovely.
And there's a shop in the back with pull-down electrical connectors and workshop and a sink, things like that. So that'll be where they work on special projects. Any questions on the Transition Academy?
Looks lovely. Lovely.
On the Geddes Fine Arts, we already got the permits. We got pre-construction. They've already secured the area with their gate entry, and that's where they're going to be staging. They're just waiting for the materials to come in so we can start the outdoor pavilion for the Science Academy and the metal panels around the chiller building. We're also going to be doing some metal trim on the front of the building, some painting work, things like that are also part of the project. So we're kicking that one off. The baseball fields, 99%. We're just doing some punch lists. They're already playing on the fields. And this is a new block wall we put in place of the old plywood that with time it would start warping and rotting, and we'd always have to replace them and paint them, and kind of a maintenance nightmare. So this block is a permanent solution, and it looks nice. And on the interior, they've ordered some panels, cushion panels, where the ball will hit softly and won't scuff the balls. This is the boys' baseball
Players get roughed up,
with the sod
more
grass,
importantly.
and again, some of the new wall pads. That's the Cardinal one, the wall pads with the green grass, and you can see here, it looks like there's nothing there, but there's a net, no more poles and blocking your view. There's a net there that you can't really see unless you look closely, and it'll protect the balls from hitting the spectators, and you have an impeded view.
So there's no balance.
Nothing that'll impede your view when you're watching the game.
Wow.
I don't know where.
And that's a close-up of the wall of the baseball field. On the exterior, it's a split-face burnished block, split-face rough block, and in the interior, it's the same thing, but it's covered with the panels. And again, some of the sod, as they came in, they tore up some of the fields. There was a lot of water and ruts, so they soldered in brand new grass. And like I said, they are playing on it already. Any questions on the softball fields, baseball fields? If not, we'll move on to the change orders that I talked about earlier. Over at the Early College High School UTRGV project, we have allowances totaling $438,000 in that project for a general allowance, there's structural steel allowance, signage allowance, and landscape allowance. They total $438,000. We have some expenditures totaling $83,560, so we still have $354,000 left in the project. Because it's over $25,000, I do have to take it to the board at the next Tuesday's board meeting so that the board can approve it. What was included in that change, there was some issues with the sanitary sewer connections, conflicting with existing water lines. One of the things that we found out there is because we bought 10, they were actually 10, it was subdivided into like 10 lots or 12 lots, we bought them all. But when the developer built that, there were water and sewer connections at every single lot. But since we are only doing one building, one project, the city made us, Waterworks, we had to do work to cap all the water lines and sewer lines that were prepped during the original development. And when we were running our main water line and sewer line connection, there was some conflicts with some of those lines, and we had to make adjustments to be able to kind of connect to the city system. So there was some changes there with the plumber we had to do and the civil subcontractor. We also, the walk-in cooler freezer just had metal panel floors, but food service is requesting we change it to a quarry tile, which is the health department likes that better. It's non-slip, and it's just more healthier looking for the health department to pass it instead of just having a floor that builds up moisture and freezes over, and it's just something that's more clean that we like to use in our kitchens. The elevator machine room, there was no air conditioning in there in the original design, and with the equipment it's going to get hot, so the engineer and the contractor looking at it said we better add some air conditioning to that room so we don't have issues later. So we'll change there. The chiller lines up on the roof got some additional support so that with time and vibration it doesn't start damaging the roof, so some additional supports that they had to put on. Air conditioning, duct and diffusers, so some conflicts on the design. They couldn't fit it in the space, so they made some adjustments, and there was a little extra cost there. The pier cap modifications at the learning stair, they had to make some changes on the foundation to support the learning stair where it landed, and there was some minor changes there. The entry canopy had some steel support changes just to give it some additional bracing. The air curtain that we usually have in the cafeteria entrance, there was no electrical connection to it, so we had to run an additional line over there to cover that. I talked about capping all those water lines, services that were there on the prior plat. Some additional steel support at a shade structure in the back. And the handrails, we did have steel that are painted, but in hindsight, we wanted aluminum so that we don't ever have to paint them. We have some issues at Kano Academy with the stairwells, the stairs as you use them with the oils from the hands. The paint just doesn't last too long. We're always having to paint it every 2-3 years. So we decided to upgrade to just aluminum and no paint. So there was an extra cost. And elevator shaft also, they noticed there was some extra steel changes they needed to do there. And some metal studs and framing work for outs in the corridor 201 and the second floor. And in the LGI room, there was some minor changes in the walls and extra sheetrock. So all those changes totaled $83,000. So we'll present that at the next board meeting for board approval as per local policy CV. Any questions on that change order?
I have another question, Mr. Chair. This is also related to what we've all been through. But since we had to go through and change out, we meaning you, Oscar, bless your heart, and your group, all of our water fountains, and I'm assuming put up, sanitation stations for the hands and all of that. Are we doing that in these new buildings, the Transition Academy and the Early College High School? Are we are we being proactive in putting in the foot pump and the water fountains and all of that? Are we going back to the standard ones and hoping that things will go well? Or where are we in terms of those kinds of devices and also the sanitation stations, washing your hands and all of that?
Well, the water fountains are the touchless systems that we're installing now, so we did have that covered.
Yes.
We didn't, and we put the standard sinks and that are in the restrooms required, and then for the staff. But they don't have this school doesn't have the additional hand sinks that we've been putting at other places, because back when we were designing this, COVID hadn't hit, and so we bid it out. And only now do we know what we did at our other schools. So that's something we can look at, that we can put some additional hand washing stations on the outside of the restrooms and lounges and things like that. So
I just think in terms, again, of being proactive, we better, I think we're going to have to start doing things like that. So we might as well do it while we've got a partner to help us participate with the, with the funding.
We'll bring that up at the next meeting, see if there's any areas that are conducive for that. That'll be helpful to the kids.
Thank you.
Change orders 1, 2, and 3 for the Treasure Hills Phase 2. AIA number 1 is actually money's coming back to our district. We had $392,200 in total allowances. We got back $5,900 on number 1. On number 2, we actually got back $26,000. And then on number 3, we paid $23,000. So overall, our balance now is $401,748. So we actually have more money than what we started. AA number 1, I'm not going to read everything because there's 3 of them, but you can just see there that there was in the 10. This is for these 3 are the first time we brought them to you. These have started from when the project first started. This particular architect, Mr. Alex, likes to do everything near the end instead of doing like 1 per month or 1 every other month. He likes to just keep it all and do one big paperwork at the end. And so that's why you see 3 of them. But the first one was when the temporary office, we originally had some very expensive steel case privacy walls. And at that time we were trying, they found COVID had hit, and we found out there was a 8 to 10 week delay on those materials, that special material that we had spec'd, and trying to get in the temporary office and the logistics of Mr. Ingram's staff over there. We said, we can't wait that long, let's just get a credit on that. We got a really big credit, and then we put temporary like metal studs and some wood walls with sheetrock, because they're temporary anyway and they're going to be tear away. Later we're going to take them down. So we made some changes to some very low cost materials that were readily available. And so that really helped expedite the project, and we saved some money as well. So that was for the offices, the nurses station, tape floating, sheetrock, store frames, electric wiring, some VCT floor, and changing the ceiling grids because one classroom turned into several offices. So there was a lot of things we had to change up on top. So like I said, on number 1, we got back $5,900. On number 2, we started hitting the outside. There was some demolition, sidewalk demo we had to do that conflicted with what the city is doing on their sidewalks. We had to relocate some trees due to some sprinkler system conflicts in the area. Some plumbing changes underground. Mr. Powers, you asked that earlier. This is where it's covered. Underground storm sewer lines. We had to readjust some sidewalk work, some pier redesign underground because of the conflicts that we ran into. New plumbing fixtures that we installed in the nurses and temporary office areas. Some floor boxes and some steel redesign for building C that I showed earlier. Some valley gutters and some more steel column splicing work because of the adjustments we had to do because of the underground conflicts. And that was number 2, which we got back $26,000. And then on number 3, this is where there were charges to the district. We actually got a credit back on an operational wall, operable partition wall that they didn't want. Mr. Ingram decided he didn't need anymore in that particular room. Some fencing work, some engineered drawings that we were asked for that was not in the original spec, some fire alarm for Building C, which is a 4th and 5th grade wing. When we changed it to offices, the fire department went in there and issued us a certificate of occupancy, but because it was the old building, they found some things that needed some upgrades on the fire alarm system, some additional emergency lights, a PA system upgrade so that everybody could communicate. So some of these were code-related things that we had to comply with, and some projection screens that were really big. They were too big for the spaces. We downsized them a little bit, and we added some paper towel dispensers that were not in the project. So that explains the 3 AEAs, number 1, 2, and 3. Beginning balance and ending balance, we have more money. So those are the 3. None of them, this is a credit back, so we won't be taking these to the board because overall we got money back. We're not exceeding 25,000 of change orders as far as cost to the district. We're getting money back. So this one doesn't technically have to go to the board, but I am required to present it to you at a facilities committee meeting. That's where we communicate with the board any changes that we're doing to the project. So that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, if there's no questions, Oscar, thank you again. The district's in great hands, and we're just moving right along. Thank you so much, and your staff, we appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter.
The next item we have is the construction funds and other projects.
Raymond Mendoza.
Mr. Mendoza? There you are, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Nirella, committee members, before you is our TRE budget. The first 5 years, our budget was $60 million, indicated right here. Year 6, which is the current year, we have a $22 million budget. So far, for years 1 through 5, we spent $54,233,828. For year 6, which is the current year, we've committed $27,077,926. Altogether, we have spent and committed $81,311,754. And if we compare that to our total original budget of $82 million, we have a positive variance of $688,246. That decrease as compared to last month, we had a $206,000 purchase order for Gutierrez Elementary. That contributed to that reduction as compared to a prior month. We're still within budget, so that's always a good sign. And I'll entertain any questions you may have on our TRE budget.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mendoza. That's very clear, and it's good that we're still in the black as much as we are. Appreciate everything. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much.
Thanks, sir.
If there's nothing further, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone, to the Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee for March 2nd, 2021. Pursuant to Governor Abbott's temporary suspension of open meetings laws issued in March 2020, already a year ago, this meeting will be conducted via audio-visual conference. So welcome to everybody. It is viewable and open to the public. So we have some agenda items today that I'm really excited about, important topics, as always, with this committee. We do have a quorum, so I will officially call this meeting to order. And our first meeting item is the teacher incentive allotment update. And this will be given by Ms. Veronica Cortan.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Nirella, senior team, and audience. This afternoon, I will actually be sharing our monthly update for our teacher incentive allotment. And so in the month of February, boy, did we hit the ground running. We have had an opportunity to work with several groups of stakeholders in our district. I do want to say a huge thank you to the teachers that participate in our TIA focus group. We have had such thoughtful conversation and feedback from them, but I do want to just thank them mostly for making sure that they really embody this whole idea of an ambassador of TIA as a way to elevate the profession. So they really have done a great job with that. Huge, huge thank you to that group. And the other group that we met with this month, we know that without our principals, transformation would never be possible. And so last week, we took about a half a day where our principals actually became the learners for TIA. They heard from their colleagues about the work with our 4 design teams, and they really were able to ask questions, provide feedback, and get a thorough understanding of our TIA local designation system. Huge thank you to our principals as well, because between last week and this week, they were able to deliver our communication plan with our teachers, where they educated teachers on TIA and really set the stage for a great way of elevating our teachers in the district. So you've seen this before. Our teachers will be able to access TIA funds via 2 pathways. So the first pathway is the National Board Certification, of which we've had a little bit of time to discuss. And our focus today of today's meeting is going to be our local designation system. So everything that we'll hear today is all about our local designation system. I do want to take a couple of seconds to frame the role of our board in TIA. So first and foremost, our board should be able to articulate our local designation system. And so today is the first time that we'll be able to sit with our board and really go through the components of that system. And then secondly, our focus in April will be the financial plan. So as far as the board is concerned, those are the 2 tenets of the role of our Board of Trustees with TIA. So as part of Pathway 2, with our local designation system, there's 3 components. Components 1 and 2, those are required by the state, and component 3 is optional. HCISD has opted to include component 3, which is additional factors, to be able to align TIA to the culture that we have in our district. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how teachers are actually eligible to access TIA funds. So they must hold an SPEC, they must be certified through SPEC. They need to be a current teacher of record when we do our submission of rosters, which there's one in the fall and will be one in the spring of this coming year. And obviously they have to be one of our employees. So those are the 3 requirements for teachers to be eligible to be considered for the TIA incentive monies. And then big drum roll, months and months and months of work in our organization. Today, I am very excited to be able to work with some of our senior team colleagues to present to our board our local designation system. So April the 13th is a very big day in our district, simply because we'll be coming forward with the recommendation and hopefully an approval of our local designation system. So in April, what you can expect, part of what you can expect is our scorecard. Mrs. Garcia will be elaborating on this, as will Mrs. Romero, Dr. Villarreal, and Mr. Strubhart. But in a nutshell, those 3 components for our district, we are proposing that student growth would have an overall weight of 50% when we think about the calculation of our scorecard. Teacher observation would be 30%, and our additional factors would be 20%. Now, the second part of our presentation, our leaders are going to elaborate on exactly what that means. But just as a reminder, there's 3 different levels of designation, that being recognized, exemplary, and masters. And so as we're going through the next part of our conversation, I just wanted to have that as a reminder for our board members and certainly for our audience. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Garcia so that she can speak about our first component.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Nirella, trustees, administration, and audience. Our design team, our data sources and eligibility matrix design team is represented by campus administration at every level, your elementary, your middle, and your high school level. And so I'm really proud of the work our design team has done to put forward the scorecard and look at all the different design elements that are included in the overall score. Our charge as a design team was to identify an instrument that measures student growth as well as establish eligibility criteria with the student outcomes. And you'll see a sample there on the screen of our top header of the scorecard. And so as we started looking at student growth and looking at assessment instruments, our team is really guided by two main principles. When we talk about data and assessment, validity and reliability is key when we're researching assessments regarding student outcomes. So I kind of wanted to give you a little picture of our thought process as we delved into this particular component of student growth. So student growth is embedded in our accountability system when you look at our STAR program. Our STAR program is a huge part of our rating. Student growth is embedded in our accountability system in domains 2 for student growth and in domains 3. So we started looking at STAR assessment program, which obviously encompasses our grades 4 through 8 and of course our end of course. Things we needed to consider if we were to seek utilizing STAR as a student growth instrument. For STAR, we do need 2 consecutive years of student outcomes to determine growth. And given last year's cancellation of STAR and our current situation with potential gaps, our team couldn't reliably use this assessment to measure student growth at this time. I know there's some flexibility this year with students coming to test and some that choose to not come to test. And so for STAR, we are looking at a phase-in approach. While you don't see that currently on the student growth section here on the scorecard, team is currently researching at phasing the STAR assessment back in because it does have a student growth component that we heavily rely on to help guide a lot of our instruction. So in having said that with STAR, our team's next process was to really carefully research some programs that are research-based, TEKS aligned, and have the capacity to calculate and measure student growth. And so I kind of want you to take a look at the scorecard here. Here what Ms. Corton had mentioned about the components of student growth, T-tests, and additional factors. At the very top of the scorecard, you're going to see an overall score, and you'll see that at 72.5, and then a TI designation there as a sample showing exemplary based on that 72.5 score. Did want to point out that overall score and that TI designation at the top of that header scorecard is an aggregate of those 3 different components: student growth, T-test, and additional factors. So I did want to point that out. I want to take you a little further down into that box that says student growth. So the state did provide a minimum set of standards in looking at student growth when we're looking at assessment instruments. And that was in an effort to help guide districts. In looking at everything we do here, our accountability system, our internal systems with identifying and tracking student growth, we wanted to align with the rigor of our accountability system. And we designed some thresholds, and you'll see them there at the very far right, top right of that box. In order for a teacher to reach a recognized status in the student growth component, teacher must have 70% or more student assessments show a growth. In order to be classified as an exemplary teacher, a teacher must have 75% or more student assessments showing growth, and for masters, an 85% or better showing growth. And those are the 3 different classifications and categories under this area. So when we talk about growth and we talk about utilizing an assessment instrument, growth is really measured by comparing students' performance. For STAR, it was measuring from one year to the next when they test in the STAR piece. When we start looking at assessment instruments, we're really looking at, in this particular instance, the student's performance on a pretest that the teacher would provide at the beginning of the year, let's say August, September, coupled with the post-test that is generally or would be generally given in April and May. So the growth formula is quite simple. It's the number of tests that meet or exceed the growth divided by the number of tests that are eligible for a measure. So when you look at that portion of the scorecard, you'll see pre-K showing CLI Engage as an assessment instrument. CLI Engage is something we already do in the district. It is reported to the state for our pre-K students. And that one does have a reliable measure of tracking student growth. In the areas, and you'll see there, kindergarten to 12th grade, we are currently finalizing our recommendation to utilize an assessment instrument called MAP Growth in those particular areas, kindergarten through 12th grade. If you look at the criteria right to the far side, to the right side of that, you'll see that in researching a lot of the programs out there and looking at the content areas, we were looking at the areas of math and reading along with science. So teachers in this particular subject areas would provide the pretest, provide the post-test, and then we come up with our calculation for student growth here. So ultimately the calculation here, and there's an example there, you'll see a 64. 64 in this instance would be, as a teacher, I have 64 possible growth measures in tests. If I'm a math teacher, I happen to have 64 students or 64 tests. And then 48 of those would have met their growth mark. So the 40 to give me an overall score of 37.5. So the calculation there is quite simple. If, for instance, I was a math teacher, if, for instance, I was a 5th grade teacher and I were to teach math and reading, as a 5th grade teacher, let's say, I would be accountable for my students in both the math and the reading. So the math and the reading pre and post tests would be an aggregate, and they would show there under the total possible growth measures. So if I'm solely a math teacher, then I'm only accountable for my math scores. So I did want to point that out. We have some teachers that probably teach 2 subject areas. In that instance, the teacher would be accountable for those subject areas pertinent to student growth. So as we look at the overall student growth component, try to make it as simple as possible to define the number of assessments that met growth over the total number of possible growth measures, and of course weighting it at 50%. So that ultimately that 37.5 you see there in bold is going to contribute to the overall score that you see there at the top once we start aggregating the remainder of the 2 components. So if we go to the next slide, we start talking about assessments, and you saw assessments there that showed MAP growth, the NWEA MAP growth from kinder through 12. And we started really researching, the team really started researching, meeting with the company and trying to understand how student growth works with the MAP system, the math growth system. And ultimately, it is a very reputable system, very comfortable with making the recommendation to move towards math growth for a variety of reasons. One of which, it is research-based, the assessment. It is a nationally normed assessment in providing the pre and post-test. It is TEKS aligned. They can align with our scope and sequence as a district, so they're able to tailor that to fit our needs. There is a great research study, a linking study on the strong correlation of how students do on that pre and post test, coupled with the STAR assessment. And that's always very valuable data that we look to make sure that it is valid, reliable, and there is a correlation. So that'll give us a good insight into tailoring our instruction based on MAP growth in order for students to grow and learn and track our instruction. The questions are calibrated on a scale that allows to track students longitudinally over time. And so I think that says a lot about the program, a lot about us here as a district. We focus and we try and heavily have a common language. Like with our Realizing Our Dream, we have a common language from K through 12 on the Realizing Our Dream. And so in looking at that, selecting math growth as a software item really provided consistency in language from K through 12 and allowed for tracking students' growth over time. So as an 8th grader, I'm able to see that child, as a teacher, able to see that child over time grow and see their measures along the way. So I think that's very data-driven, very informative, and can help the teacher tailor the instruction to meet the child's needs.
So good evening. I have the next part. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Dr. Nirella, senior team and audience. So I will be covering the teacher observation information. And so I'm going to just, if y'all will look at the screen there and look at our sample that we have there, I'm going to start off at the very top. It speaks to, in order to be eligible for a TIA designation, teachers must have a minimum rating of 3, which is proficient in all of the dimensions or indicators. So that's just for starters. We want our teachers to at least be proficient or above in order to be considered for these different designations. And so up on the top right-hand side, there's also a scale there that we used. So in order to be a recognized teacher on T-Test, we're looking at a rating of a 3.7 to a 3.89. For exemplary, it would be a 3.9 to a 4.49. And for masters, we're looking at a ranking of a 4.5 to a 5.0. And so looking at the actual sample that we have there, you can see that we're focusing on 2 domains, domains 2 and 3. Domain 2 is all centered around instruction. We're looking at the expectations, their content knowledge and expertise, how they communicate, differentiation of instruction, how they're monitoring, adjusting the instruction. Those are all the pieces of our domain 2. And for our domain 3, which encompasses the learning environment, we're looking at the classroom environment. What are the routines? What are the procedures like? Managing their student behavior, and then the culture of the classroom are also very important. So you can see in this sample, you look at those ratings, there's a combination of 3s and 5s, and when we average that out, it came out to a 4. So when you look at the top back at where that 4 falls, and you can see in the very bottom bar, that yellow, this particular sample, a teacher would be in the exemplary category. Now looking at that 4 out of possible perfect score of a 5, that's 80%. And so when you look at that 80% out of that possible 30 points, you would come up with a 24, which would be added to the, all 3 would be added to see what that overall score would come out to. And so next I want to go to the next slide and really talk about what are the things that we're going to really focus on. With our T-test and observation, we know that the most difficult part is to get all of us to be on the same page. And so a big key to this is going to be how we use our collaboration about and calibrate all of our walkthroughs, and also as we're going through T-test. One of the things that we have discussed is looking at our walkthrough forms and streamlining them and having one walkthrough form across the district, so we can be looking at data and being consistent with that, along with looking at longitudinal data of our actual T-test instrument, and what does that look like? So we would have that consistency across the district. The end goal for us here as well, for our teachers, is to make sure that we're providing feedback and coaching, because we want that instruction to be at the level where it's making sure that all of our students are mastering their skills, right? So that's going to be a very important piece. We're looking at the concept of teams when we're doing these evaluations. So when you have a team of people, you kind of take out, you have different people coming together, and so you see what that looks like. You're not just getting one lens, you're getting different lenses and coming together and kind of taking out any type of inconsistencies that you may have. Obviously, these teams would have to be highly trained and make sure that they've gone through very rigorous types of training to make sure that they're all looking for the same things. Also leveraging the expertise. We have a lot of expertise in this district. I think of our directors like Carmen Alvarez, that her expertise is at early literacy, right? In early childhood classrooms, what should they be looking at? What should our teachers be doing? I think about Norma Garcia, who's also an expert with our dual language classrooms, and what should those classes be looking like? We have Mr. Garza, who has that special ed background. So really leveraging all of that expertise and using that team concept to make sure that we're being consistent, and at the same time providing feedback and coaching our teachers to make sure we're elevating them to the best position that they can be at. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Varela for the next part.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Nirella, board members and senior team members, and everyone zooming in. I was happy to lead the additional factors group. What you see on the screen in front of you is the leadership definition here at HCISD, and we wanted to find a way to align our TIA to our leadership definition, because it's an example of all the great things that our teachers and our leaders are doing in our school district. So Ms. Corton, next slide, please. So like Ms. Corton mentioned earlier, unlike the student growth and teacher observation components, the additional factors is an optional component permitted by the teacher incentive allotment that we wanted to include, because this gives us an opportunity for our teachers to shine even more. In addition to meeting with our TIA teacher focus group, our committee also looked at, like I said, at our leadership definition to identify those dimensions that we could include in the TIA. Our committee landed on 4 additional factors, and those being our student survey, parent survey, looking at professional leadership, and looking at teacher attendance. The first 2 additional factor components will include student and parent surveys, and that will evaluate how our teachers are connecting with the school community, how they're delivering instruction, how they're exhibiting quality customer service to our parents and students, and that aligns perfectly with the leadership dimension of building trusting relationships. The next 2 additional factors came about as a result of our conversations with our TIA teacher focus group. For professional leadership, our focus group felt that we needed to give teachers the opportunity to exhibit their leadership behaviors on campus and across the district. This factor will allow our teachers to seek out professional development to not only improve their classroom instructional practices, but to also coach other teachers on quality instructional practices. In addition, we want our teachers to increase their sphere of influence by taking on instructional leadership positions on their campus. And again, this aligns perfectly with our leadership definition of developing self and others. They're taking advantage of the opportunities to develop themselves, but also at the same time coaching others. And also, our focus group wanted to include teacher attendance as our 4th factor, as there is nothing better than having a high-quality teacher present every day in school instructing our students. So as you can see on this screen, the additional factors would weigh 20% of an overall score. So for any student survey positive result that they get, every professional leadership opportunity that they take advantage, they would be able to earn a point, and all of those points would contribute to the overall score that a teacher would get in the teacher incentive allotment. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Strupart.
Thank you, Dr. Villarreal. Good evening, Madam Chairman, trustees, fellow senior team members. The teacher incentive allotment application asks specifically what ACISD is going to do in the area of recruiting and retaining teachers. And specifically, what will TIA funds, how will TIA funds be used in that area? As I mentioned before, in our last meeting, Singapore does an exceptional job of keeping teachers in the classroom and recruiting the very best teachers. And so they are an excellent model to use whenever we are looking at how we do that. So we have been visiting with elementary and secondary teachers to get feedback on a teacher pathway. So I want to share some of the progress we've made with our teachers. Ms. Cortan, you want to move to that next slide there? And so, much like the Singapore model, there are 4 levels that teachers can attain throughout their educational career. And so it's interesting when you visit with elementary and secondary teachers, very different worlds. And I'm sure Lori and Joseph can tell you, they think very differently. And so we've had some great feedback from them. Now, keep in mind, I think Dr. Pettis mentioned a lot about the master teacher, that being the highest level teacher. And so that we're trying to stay away from the terminology that's being used in TIA And so TIA and Cortan does a great job of reminding us it's REM, Recognized Exemplary Masters. Those are the 3 levels with TIA. And so we want to use our own language. And so in speaking with teachers, we have come up with a couple of options here, with advanced teachers being at the very beginning levels. And it wouldn't be a brand new teacher, it'd be someone that maybe coming in 3 years. They could qualify for that level, all the way up to scholar teacher would be our highest level, I think, university. And each level, they would receive a gold star that they could put on their badge. And speaking with teachers, they're very proud to be wearing those badges with stars on them. Well, after we talked to some teachers and proposed our first model, which is advanced lead teacher, senior teacher, scholar teacher, got some great feedback on why don't you make it more clear about where a teacher sits in the level, in the system. And so, now, why don't you come up with using metallurgy terminology here? Now, we couldn't use black belts and green belts and brown belts because not everyone knows what the highest level is, right? But one thing that is clear is when you talk about metal, people know what that bronze, silver, gold, and platinum are levels, and that platinum would be the highest level. You know, Dr. Perez, I believe you named your surgery platinum surgery, right? It is the best surgery you could possibly get is at Dr. Perez's platinum surgery location. So, and it makes a lot of sense. And so when teachers when teachers walk around with, say, a polo shirt that says a gold level teacher, they know they're at the 3rd level. Now, one of the things we're also discussing with teachers is the requirements for each one of these levels. Now, in the application, it doesn't require that we go into that much detail at this time. So we have plenty of time to vet out what are the years of requirements for each one of these levels, and what duties would be assigned, what would be the monetary benefit for each one of these levels. And so we're still working on those pieces, but overall, when we talk to teachers and we ask them, is this something that you would like to see in ACISD? Overwhelmingly, yes. They are very excited about introducing this kind of model to ACISD, and now I can see why it's successful in Singapore. And if you notice the graphic, I got a hand to our graphic artist, Roland Ansodilli. He's incredible. At the bottom level, you can see the bookmark is in the beginning chapters. And as you progress through your learning, because one of the expectations that's resonated from all teachers is that these folks that progress this model are lifelong learners. They have a growth mindset. They never stop learning. As a matter of fact, when I mentioned, if you notice, they're at the last chapter. As a scholar teacher, they're in the last chapter, and one teacher said, "Oh, that's just the first book." So I thought, oh, that's great. Yeah, that's true. That scholar teacher is going to be grabbing another book to learn. So we definitely had the right teachers in the focus group. So I wanted to give you an update on the ACISD teacher pathway and the progress we're making. Again, we have some time to work on this, but it's some real exciting work that we're working on. Thank you.
So thank you to all our presenters. Looking forward to April's TIA update to this committee. Today we spoke about the local designation system. We'll bring back our final version of that and also couple that with our TIA financial plan. And that's what you can expect at this committee meeting in April. And so with that, I will open it up to questions and conversation.
Well, thank you to all of the presenters, and I just want to add, I know our committee will all agree, thank you to the design team members and the principals for all the work. Very clear and very thoughtful presentation, and I'm sure we have lots of questions because we love this stuff. So I'm going to open it up to committee members, board trustees. Any questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Please, go ahead, Javier.
Okay, I have thank you. I have great presentation. I loved it, and I love the pathways, and I mean it resonates a positive path. I mean it's just you guys hit a home run. I have a couple of questions though on the additional factors and the observation. Actually, I have that question which kind of is combined into two.
what strategy do you have in place? And I know you talked a little bit about it, where a lot of, when you get to the observation and you get to the additional factors, some of it becomes subjective. And because some of it becomes subjective, you may have, and you're observing a classroom and you're observing the culture and you're observing the way the students are interacting. Have you, I mean, some classes are more challenging than other classes. There's classes that there's at-risk individuals that maybe have issues, or there's also some classes that the classes are a little easier to train and to provide some of the instruction. So have you, I have a one on a growth too, but on that particular one, have you looked at that, and what's the strategy on that? Because there's some teachers that have classes that it's a very, you know, the class is easy, and some other classes it's a little bit more of a challenge. So the teacher may be at a disadvantage depending on who they have.
And so you're correct, Mr. De Leon. And so what's very important with that is, number one, conferencing with the teacher ahead of time to getting some background. And you just can't go into the evaluation. There has to be walkthroughs where you get snippets of time of getting yourself acclimated to the classroom, right? Because you're right, every setting is different and every teacher has different challenges. At the end of the day, the good instruction is going to be good instruction, right? But that's where those procedures come in and all those other factors that we talked about. But definitely what's going to be imperative is that conversation, so that you can have that conversation with the teacher and get true background of what is in that classroom. Because you're correct, they're all different. It's not a one size fits all.
And I do want to add, Mr. De Leon, that
Yes,
teachers will have to declare if they're interested in being considered for TIA. And the reason that we're wanting them to declare early is so that we can really look at them as a cohort of teachers. We will be offering very, very particular professional development for those teachers. And we'll also be looking at T-tests with them, with their appraiser and with additional appraisers that we really want to have a team effort. And so any teacher who is going to declare their intent to want to be considered for TIA will have to go through some required training. One of those being a very intense T-test training where they understand the tool and they understand the entire process of what their evaluation will look like with teacher observation. So I think that too will strengthen our system as well.
yeah, and as long as it's just, it's fair and transparent, where some teachers are going to have an easier class than another teacher, and it's going to be more of a challenge, and as much as instruction as you can get and as much training as you can get, there's easier classes and other classes, and as long as it's weighted accordingly, then I think it'll be fair for everyone. I guess my part two, and then I'll open up to the rest of the board. My last question was on the growth. So what you're saying is maybe we're not necessarily going on the STAR testing, so it's going to be going on in a classroom. It's going to go on an individual pre-test exam. So that means if there's 20 individuals in a classroom, each child is going to be, the progress of each child is going to be based on that individual person alone, not necessarily on their grade level that they're supposed to be in, or the grade level that they were coming in from, because, you know, in every classroom, students are functioning at different grade levels. So the pre-test is going to determine where they individually are at that moment, and then from there, that pre-test, whatever growth is going to be coming in is going to be the growth from where they did the pre-test at the beginning, not necessarily the STAR or the grade level. Is that correct?
Yes, you said it very well. As a teacher, my students would be taking the pretest. You mentioned 20 kids. My students would be taking the pretest with me in the fall, and I own those kids, right? They are with me from beginning, take the pretest. It is an adaptive test, so it does test them according to the skills that they know. And they do compare their results, and I say they map growth system, does compare them with peers that are in that particular percentile. So it is a fair student growth outcome and projected measure for then the post-test. So yes, those students would be with me at the start of the year and at the end of the year. Unlike STAR that measures growth from prior year to one whole year later in the spring. So that's quite different. But yes, you're correct. It's a pre-test and the post-test, and then we measure growth from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to just remind the trustees as we're moving forward, we've got about 20 minutes before we start a special board meeting, but I want to make sure to cover as many questions as you have before moving to the other agenda item too. So, Dr. Muniz, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, listen, I love this stuff. Soon to be Dr. Corton, excellent job. I love this information, and your team has done an excellent job of presenting it, because it's I mean, initially when you presented it, I was like, how are we going to do this? And you come up with a how. We know the why, and now you come up with a how, which is excellent. Pointing out a couple of things. I love the other options, right? The feedback. Listen, if we can't measure stuff, how can we manage it, right? And that's what this is all about. Measuring stuff, managing, and also getting that feedback. I also say feedback is the breakfast of champions. Sometimes we don't want to hear it. We don't want to know what's going on with our kids. We don't want to know, but actually we need to know. It's critical that we're doing this. This is something I've talked to Dr. Cavazos about. Hey, we really, really, really need to know. So we are in the customer service business. Despite what everybody else says, we're in the customer service business. We need to know how our parents are how are things going with the parents, how are things going with the teachers. And so aligned with what Javier was talking about, and I know you're working on this, I know this is something that we're building and we're growing. Just in those questions also, we need to know how critical they are, because I can ask you a question and I'll get an answer. But I can always ask a better question and get a better answer. So we're going to make sure that those questions, those feedback questions, are going to be better questions, right?
Yes, and we are, Dr. Villarreal and his team are working with a couple of companies that are very reputable. People, actually, one of the companies we met through our partnership with Holdsworth, we do our 360 feedback, and so we have seen a lot of value in that. And so we are looking at a couple of possible partners to help us, guide us, to ensure that the questions are crafted correctly. That will not be something we do internally. We'll look to experts in that field.
We want to make sure that it's a valid and reliable instrument, and as well as the transparency that Ms. Corton spoke about, allowing teachers to see these are the survey questions that your parents and your students will be asked at the end of the year, so that they're well aware.
Absolutely, that's critical. I mean, why would we do a survey and not give them the feedback, right? Well, they need to know it. Maybe it's anonymous. I don't know what you're going to do about that. But critical that we know, hey, this is what they're thinking about, this is what they're saying, so we can adapt and change to be just better and better. Thank you so much for this great presentation.
Dr. Reiner, I know we've got to go, but just one quick summation statement, if I could. I agree with Bobby.
Please.
I agree with Bobby on the excitement on some of the things here. I would like to, first of all, fantastic job. This is amazing. And I know it's going to be a living document. Perhaps in a year, you tweak it, based on what you're seeing and how it actually performs. And so, this seems like you've come up with the winning formulation. I would like to ask that maybe you think about it differently and pitch it differently. And here's what I mean by that. Even though all the 50% of the weight is in the student growth, I think if you almost, maybe even include that last, not first, but last, because, somehow I don't want any focus to be about test and this and testing and teaching the test or whatever, which we're never going to do that in HCISD, but think about, and what Bobby just talked about, think about what really is going to impact teacher and student interactions and performance here, and student and parent student and parent teacher interactions here, right? It's those things and the additional factors, right? The surveys, the professional leadership and how they're collaborating in the department and with other teachers in the campus, their attendance. So in my mind, I'm really excited about the additional factors. So if we focus on that, And then the teacher observations, huge. I envision our campuses with people visiting teachers profoundly more than we've ever done before. And if that happens, and we've mentioned this in board meetings over the years, the more we visit and observe teachers, the better instruction and the better the learning occurs in the classrooms. So in my mind, I'm really excited, even though it's 20%, 30%, that kind of, those things are what's going to drive the 50% in student growth. So I think we need to flip the narrative a bit here and focus on what's important and focus on what's going to really impact the student, parent, teacher interaction here. So thank you, home run, great job.
Thank you.
Dr. Reiniger?
Yes, Mrs.
Hi,
Garcia.
Mrs. Terry. Yes, hello.
And if we can just watch our time. that
Very
would be
quickly,
fine.
right, I just have 2 sentences to say. I was just thinking the entire time during this extraordinary presentation, what a team to build a dream, right? What a team to build a dream. We have dreamt of doing something like this in public education for decades upon decades upon decades. And now that we are here, HCISD has put together an extraordinary team to build this dream. I'm so proud of all of our teacher input. I am so proud of our design teams. I am so proud of our direction. And I'm also so proud of every single one of our board members' input tonight. So, you know, this is something that will literally change the face of public education. And I truly believe it's going to be this district that is going to do it the best of all in the state of Texas. So what a team to build a dream. And I'm with you all the way. Thank you. Cannot wait for all the specificity that we're going to be having at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fleury, and what a great summary to a great presentation. So we will transition, and Mrs. Corton, as we move to the next your next month's presentation, I know we'll have the opportunity, and there's some just little questions that I would love to get together and ask you about for further detail, but just again, because I'm excited about it, so look forward to that as well. So this is also a topic that is, affects all of our lives and all of our children's lives. So we are going to now transition to the calendar discussion. And so I'm going to turn this back to you, Mrs. Corton, and also to Coach Rob Davies.
So I apologize that I shared my screen a little prematurely. I'm excited about calendar. Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Nirella, senior team, and audience, we are going to be having a discussion today about our calendar. Very excited to be a co-presenter with Coach Davies, and he'll be joining our presentation here shortly. So timeline, we open up our voting tomorrow, excited about that, and we will finish on Friday at noon so that we can prepare for next week's board meeting where we'll bring that forward. And of course, in years past, we have had just campus personnel vote on our calendar. I want to talk a little bit, very briefly, about something that you will see in our calendar this year. As you know, we are required to provide 75,600 minutes of instructional time to our students. And so historically, our calendar allowed us to meet that and have an excess of days. Those excess days past the 75,600, we are proposing this year, we're adding those this year to our calendar, and we're calling those innovative days. It is no secret that our students, as we transition to next year, we need to rethink systems of how we're going to deliver individualized learning for our students. The gaps we have both with achievement and I would also say social emotional, all of those gaps we are going to need to rethink how we approach calendar. So today we're talking a little bit about innovative days. In our current calendar options, we have a total of 6 innovative days. And during those days, we will be offering support for students. And that can look like social emotional, that can look like academic, extracurricular, and things of the sort. I'm going to hand it over to Coach Davies so that he can talk a little bit with a little bit more specificity about our Innovative Days.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, trustees, Dr. Nirella, senior team, and audience. The Innovative Days, it was a real treat for me to be a part of this process and visit with the committee and the principals. And as we picked up the topic of what would the day actually look like, we pulled some of the lead people from the committee, and we kind of outlined what you see on the screen here. These Innovative Days will be used to address the achievement gaps. We know that there's going to be gaps whenever we get our kiddos back in the classroom, and so these 6 days are really designed to try and make up some of the lost time that we've had with those students. We're looking at an incentive to be able to tell kids, hey, you're on track and where you need to be, and you're not going to be required to come to school on that particular day. We're going to put the focus on the kids who actually need to be there and get the enrichment and the coursework that we need. Another thing that we're talking about, these Innovative Days are going to be designed by the campus to meet their specific needs. There's some set criteria that we have for each campus, but we didn't want to handcuff them. The campus is going to be able to look at their data and be able to develop their plan to just meet the needs of their specific campus. The next thing that we talked about was the students who are in CTE and extracurricular activities. So the schedule this day is going to look very different. There's going to be 6 of these days. Some of these kids are going to have practices, they're going to have performances, they're going to have practicums, all these different things. And so one of the things that we wanted to build in with the principals as they make their plan is to take those things into account. And with our leaders of these programs also, tell them, hey, this may be an opportunity for you to provide some enrichment in your particular area as well. So I'm really excited about these 6 days. I think as we get a little bit further, we're going to really be able to see how they're going to benefit our students and work towards catching them up in the time that they've lost with their teachers in the classroom.
Thank you, Coach. And as you can imagine, communication plan needs to be designed just right so that our community understands the intent of the Innovative Days. And so I'll be working with Mr. Strupart, and next Tuesday, when we adopt our calendar, we'll also include a communication plan so that our community realizes what Innovative Days are. One thing I do want to point out is that while we are looking at creating an incentive program for our students to possibly be exempt from that day, we realize that not all of our parents have the flexibility to have their students at home. So for that reason, as we work with Mrs. Romero and Dr. Villarreal, all of our students will have the opportunity to come to campus should their family need them at the campus. And so for those students that may not need a particular type of remediation or enrichment in one area, we will still have an opportunity for them to come to our campus. I'm going to just throw out a quick example. Melissa Parker is part of our calendar committee, and she is completely thrilled about Innovative Days because she would like to look at things like acceleration with AP test prep. She wants to look at accelerating some of our GT programming at the elementary. And so there's a lot of opportunities, thus the name Innovative Days. We didn't want to lock it into one particular type of gap that we're closing, so Innovative Days encompassed all of that. So that kind of ends our conversation about next year's calendar. I'm going to shift us to this year's calendar. So as we have looked at our excess days and as we have just really stood back and looked at the year, we are looking at the possibility of having an early end to our calendar for students. We are proposing that our last instructional day be moved to June the 11th, which is bumping everything up 1 week. That would change our graduation dates, as you can see on the screen, to June 11th and 12th. And all of our campus, all of our employees, though, will still be able to fulfill their contractual days. So our staff at the campuses would remain with us for the week of the 14th through the 18th, the 19th of June. And so as we looked at the year, and you think about everything we've been through, not just the pandemic, but just things that have come our way, we really thought that we could take time to sit back and take a couple of days to reflect on the year, but to also reflect on our practices. One of the ways that we are already, this year has just been filled with reflection. And so even as we prepare for that fourth quarter, our teachers, we've had these conversations about what would the fourth quarter look like if, we're getting more students coming in face-to-face, and we want to make sure that as they're coming in face-to-face, they're going to be engaged and they're really going to have a great experience on our campuses. But we can't forget about the students who are remote learners. So one of the pieces of reflection that we really have been talking about with Dr. Nirella is, could the fourth quarter possibly be a restructure of how we do face-to-face and remote instruction, where we're truly having classrooms with face-to-face and having classrooms addressing the remote learners. So that's one of the topics of reflection. Depending on what that fourth quarter looks like, at any rate, that last week would allow us reflection time. Our STAR data would be in by that time, and so we could huddle with principals and teachers and really start preparing, because the lift with the individualized education planning can start in the month of June. And so the beauty of having that early end is that we actually get a jump start for our planning for next year. And so with that, I will say thank you, and I will open it up or hand it back to Dr. Reininger.
Thank you, Ms. Cortan and Coach Davies. So we have questions? Let's move right to questions because we've got about 5 minutes.
Dr. Reininger, not a question. Thank you. Not a question, but I would just like to once again commend almost Dr. Cortan and the people with whom you've been working. This is an extraordinarily thoughtful plan, and it's going to, I think, prove to be a very necessary plan. And so I appreciate the fact that we're thinking ahead and looking toward how we can analyze where we have come and how we can address the needs of our students, which are going to be very different in scope and in topic. We have a real job to do to help these students overcome what has happened to them, and which in no way have they been responsible. We have a real job. And so I appreciate so much this district doing some forward thinking and planning for how we're going to address this. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Poirier. Other comments or questions? All right. Hearing none, we will move to the next agenda item. I'm going to turn it to Dr. Nirella to talk about upcoming topics.
Thank you, Dr. Reininger. After hearing both of today's presentations, I think you'll agree that as we looked at that one pager of what our teacher incentive allotment is, 6 months of work went into crafting that document. And that's just thanks to the people that we have on our screen and all of our district leaders across all of our campuses who contributed to this process. But I just want to take a minute to commend all of our people on the screen, because it is a tremendous amount of work that has to go to really produce a quality product, and I think that's where we're at. And so on the heels of that, one of the items that you certainly will be hearing more about as we look to future Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee meetings are our teacher academies. And so obviously Shane talked a little bit about what that will look like, but even those will call for a lot of work and effort that will come into really crafting how do we prepare our teachers for this teaching profession and retain them, because that's where we want to have our quality staff in the classrooms. And so we'll be hearing more about our teacher academies, certainly. One of the things that we are studying, so as we go into next year, had a lot of conversation around face-to-face instruction and virtual instruction and how it has worked for some students and maybe not for others. but there are students for whom it has worked. And so as we look to the future, one of the things that we are studying is what a virtual academy could look like for those students who do have that particular interest, that maybe want to move ahead, really crafting an opportunity for students to have increased access to different types of programs and coursework and so forth. And so we are doing some work around what does that look like. I've asked the staff to look at what does the profile of a successful virtual student look like, so that if and when we open a virtual academy, we can be very targeted about who are truly candidates for that. And so a lot of work happening in that arena. Certainly, we are getting ready to open our early college high school UTRGV campus, and so we are looking to have some discussion around even the naming of the campus and what will that look like, because we no longer have that ECHS designation. And so this is an opportunity to really relook at what does that type of learning stand for and what name would be appropriate to that. And so we'll be coming back to you with additional discussion around that. And certainly, I had a meeting with our HAFE board earlier today, and the work that is going into our transition academy. We heard Oscar talk about the physical layout, but there is just so much that is going in. We're going to see some amazing things out of that campus, and so we'll be looking to bring an update on that as well. But again, I want to commend all of our staff that's on screen today for the work that you heard about with our TIA, but also on our calendar. Because that work, in and of itself, as we think about how will we intervene for our students who have had some losses this past year. And so the work that will happen that last week of school is just going to be critical to get us off on the right start at the beginning of the year. So just kudos to everybody that's on the screen. And Mrs. Corton, thank you for your leadership in both of those initiatives. Dr. Reiner?
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Nirella. Thank you, everyone, for the great input. As always, another packed-filled, meaty, Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee. Thank you for attending. At this point, we will adjourn.
Okay, I now call this special board meeting of the HEISD Board of Trustees to order. Pursuant to Governor Abbott's temporary suspension of open meetings laws, we will do this an audio-visual meeting. So we do have a quorum, and we'll get right to it. Item number 3 is public comments for agenda topics. Do we have public comments for agenda topics?
No, sir, there are no requests for public comments for agenda topics.
Thank you, Denise. Item number 4 is public audience for non-agenda topics. Do we have public audience for non-agenda topics?
No, sir, there are no requests for a public audience for non-agenda topics.
Thank you. We'll now move into item number 5, consideration and approval of waiver for missed instructional days due to inclement weather and electrical outages at schools. Ms. Veronica Corten.
Mr. President, board members, Dr. Nirella, senior team, and audience, I come forward this evening with a consideration and approval, or a hopeful approval of the waiver for our missed instructional days due to our inclement weather. As you know, the week of February 16th through the 20th, we closed our schools for the safety of our community. And so as such, TEA is allowing districts to submit attendance waivers so that we will not have to go back and make up those minutes for those particular days. We've studied the waiver system and are ready to proceed should we have an approval. And so at this time, I'd like to mention that the administration recommends that the board approve the waiver for the missed instructional days as presented.
President, I move approval as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Pettis and a second by Mr. Powers. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 6 is consideration and approval of resolution to pay full-time staff at Harlingen CISD due to closure of school district on February 16th and 17th, 2021. Mr. Julio Cavazos, or is it Mr. Ramon Mendoza, please?
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, board members, Dr. Nirella, senior team. Before you all, and let me see, I'll have y'all share the screen. We have our our emergency school closing resolution. This resolution will pay, if approved, full-time staff at Harlingen CISD due to closure of our district on February 16th and 17th. As you know, our administration instructed staff to stay home and not report to work. Since that not compensating full-time staff will place an undue financial burden, we are bringing forth a resolution to pay them for these days. If TAA, if the instructional waiver for TAA is not granted, staff will need to make up these days. But again, we're looking at 2 days, and we are recommending approval on this resolution as presented.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion for approval as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Mees and a second by Dr. Reininger. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we'll adjourn to close our executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082. The Open Meetings Act for the following purpose: discuss employment of teachers and other professional staff. We are now in executive session. We're live. We are now reconvened into open session for action on matters discussed in executive session. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the staff, the recommendations for employment as recommended by staff in executive session.
Second the motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Powers, second by Dr. Perez. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned.
Okay, stay alive.